The alarm shrieked through airfield Blackwood as the F-22 Raptor spiraled out of control, its pilot unconscious after a bird strike shattered the cockpit. Emergency crews raced across the tarmac while the tower frantically called for any available pilot with clearance to fly the backup interceptor. But when a quiet maintenance technician stepped forward and said she could handle it, the entire control room erupted in dismissive laughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Chen moved through the shadows of Hangar 7 at Edwards Air Force Base like she belonged to the machinery itself. At 29, she possessed an unremarkable presence that seemed designed to blend into the background of military aviation. Her slight frame was always draped in oil-stained coveralls, her long black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her hands perpetually smudged with engine grease. To the pilots and officers who strutted through the hangar, she was simply another wrench turner, another invisible cog in the vast machine of military operations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete floor as Sarah knelt beside the landing gear of a disabled F-16, her fingers working with methodical precision through a complex hydraulic system that had baffled 3 other mechanics. She moved with the kind of fluid expertise that comes from years of intimate knowledge, yet no one bothered to notice the subtle confidence in her movements or the way she seemed to understand the aircraft's problems before even running diagnostics. Captain Reynolds strode past her workspace, his flight suit crisp and his confidence radiating the entitled swagger that came with being the squadron's golden boy. He paused to observe her work, his expression carrying the casual condescension reserved for support personnel. "Still playing with toys down here, Chen," he called out, loud enough for the other mechanics to hear. "Maybe you should stick to changing oil filters instead of pretending you understand real aircraft systems." Sarah didn't look up from her work, her wrench continuing its steady rhythm against the stubborn hydraulic coupling. She'd learned years ago that responding to such comments only invited more attention, and attention was the last thing she needed. The other mechanics within earshot chuckled nervously, unwilling to defend her but uncomfortable with the obvious disrespect. In the rigid hierarchy of military aviation, maintenance personnel existed in a separate world from the pilots who flew the machines they kept operational. "I heard she applied for pilot training 3 times, whispered Staff Sergeant Mitchell to his colleague as they pretended to work on a nearby engine. Each time they rejected her application before she even got to the physical evaluation. Probably some quota thing, or maybe she just doesn't have what it takes to handle real flying." The comment stung more than Sarah cared to admit, though her expression remained carefully neutral. She'd grown accustomed to being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated at every turn. Her personnel file showed nothing remarkable. High school graduate from a small town in Oregon, enlisted straight out of school, worked her way up through various maintenance positions over the past decade. On paper, she was exactly what everyone assumed her to be, a competent but unremarkable technician who'd found her ceiling in the enlisted ranks. What her file didn't reveal was the countless hours she spent after duty studying flight manuals, memorizing aircraft specifications, and running flight simulations on outdated training software she'd managed to access through unofficial channels. Her small quarters off base contained a library of aviation texts that would have impressed any flight instructor. Books she'd purchased with her modest enlisted salary and studied by lamplight after exhausting 12-hour shifts maintaining the aircraft she dreamed of flying. The hydraulic system finally yielded to her expertise, and Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as the landing gear cycled smoothly through its full range of motion. She'd identified and corrected a problem that had grounded the aircraft. For 3 days, a complex issue involving multiple system interactions that required both technical knowledge and intuitive understanding of aircraft behavior. Yet when she signed off on the repair log, She knew the credit would go to the shift supervisor who'd barely glanced at her work. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres approached her workstation, carrying a clipboard and wearing the harried expression of someone dealing with too many problems and too few solutions. Torres was one of the few officers who treated maintenance personnel with basic respect, though she maintained the professional distance required by military protocol. "Chen, I need you to prep the backup F-22 for a possible emergency scramble. We've got reports of unidentified aircraft approaching restricted airspace, and our primary interceptor is still down with engine problems." Sarah nodded silently, already moving toward the hangar where the backup Raptor waited in pristine condition. She'd been maintaining this particular aircraft for months, and she knew every system, every quirk, every subtle characteristic that made it unique among the squadron's fleet. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency through the pre-flight preparation, checking fuel systems, verifying weapon status, and ensuring all electronic countermeasures were functioning properly. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the aircraft's perfect condition, the way every system hummed with the precise harmony that came from expert maintenance. This wasn't just a machine to her, it was a living entity that deserved respect, understanding, and the kind of care that came from genuine passion rather than mere duty. She'd spent countless hours ensuring every component operated at peak efficiency, not because regulations required it, but because she understood that pilot safety depended on mechanical perfection. The radio crackled with increasing urgency as air traffic control tracked the approaching unknown aircraft. Sarah listened to the chatter while continuing her preparations, her trained ear picking up the subtle tension in the controllers' voices. This wasn't a routine intercept. Something about the situation had everyone on edge, though the specifics remained classified above her clearance level. Captain Reynolds emerged from the briefing room, his earlier cockiness replaced by the focused intensity of a pilot preparing for potential combat. He approached the F-22 with the proprietary attitude of someone who believed the aircraft existed solely for his use, barely acknowledging Sarah's presence as she completed the final system. "Checks. Is my bird ready, mechanic?" he asked, his tone suggesting that any delay would be personally offensive. "All systems green, sir," Sarah replied, stepping back to allow him access to the aircraft. "Fuel load is optimal, weapon systems are armed and ready, and all electronic countermeasures are functioning within normal parameters." She handed him the maintenance log, her professional demeanor masking the frustration she felt at being treated like a piece of equipment rather than the skilled technician who'd made his mission possible. Reynolds climbed into the cockpit with the fluid motion of someone who'd performed the action thousands of times, his hands moving automatically through the startup sequence. Sarah watched from the ground, her eyes tracking every gauge, every indicator, every subtle sign that might indicate potential problems. She knew this aircraft better than anyone, and she felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as the engine spooled up to full power. The F-22 rolled out of the hangar with Reynolds at the controls, its twin engines producing the distinctive roar that marked it as one of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. Sarah followed protocol by moving to the designated safety area, but her attention remained focused on the aircraft as it taxied toward the runway. She'd done everything in her power to ensure a successful mission, yet she remained invisible, unacknowledged, and completely excluded from the action that would follow. The tower's radio chatter grew more intense as the unidentified aircraft continued its approach toward restricted airspace. Sarah listened carefully, her understanding of tactical aviation allowing her to piece together fragments of information that painted a concerning picture. The unknown aircraft was moving at speeds and altitudes that suggested either highly advanced technology or desperate pilots willing to push conventional aircraft beyond safe limits. Reynolds received clearance for immediate takeoff, and Sarah watched the F-22 accelerate down the runway with the explosive power that never failed to inspire awe. The aircraft rotated smoothly, its nose pointing toward the sky as it climbed rapidly toward the intercept coordinates. Within seconds, it had disappeared from view, leaving only the fading sound of its engines and the acrid smell of jet fuel hanging in the desert air. But something was wrong. Sarah's trained ear detected a subtle irregularity in the engine sound just before the aircraft disappeared from view, a barely perceptible change in pitch that suggested a developing problem with the left engine's fuel flow system. She'd noticed similar symptoms during ground testing the previous week, but her reports had been dismissed as overcautious maintenance paranoia by supervisors who prioritized mission schedules over mechanical concerns. The radio crackled with Reynolds' voice, his earlier confidence replaced by growing concern. "Tower, this is Raptor 1. I'm showing intermittent warnings on the left engine. Fuel flow is fluctuating outside normal parameters, and I'm getting temperature spikes on the exhaust gas readings." Sarah's heart sank as she realized her worst fears were materializing. The fuel flow issue she'd identified during routine maintenance was manifesting under the stress of high-altitude combat operations, exactly as she'd predicted in her written reports. But those reports had been filed away without serious consideration, dismissed as the overcautious concerns of a maintenance technician who didn't understand operational priorities. "Raptor 1, can you continue the intercept?" came the tower's response, the controller's voice carrying the weight of a difficult decision. The unknown aircraft was still approaching, and there were no other interceptors immediately available. The mission hung in the balance, dependent on Reynolds' ability to overcome mechanical problems that might have been prevented with proper attention to maintenance warnings. "Negative tower, I'm experiencing multiple system failures. The left engine is running rough, and I'm getting master caution lights across the board. I need to return to base immediately before this situation gets worse." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the bitter satisfaction of being proven right mixed with genuine concern for Reynolds' safety. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd seen this exact scenario play out in her mind dozens of times, and she knew that the aircraft's backup systems would likely allow him to return safely if he followed proper emergency procedures. But the failed intercept mission would have consequences that extended far beyond one pilot's embarrassment. As Reynolds nursed the damaged F-22 back toward the airfield, Sarah began mentally preparing for the investigation that would follow. There would be questions about maintenance procedures, reviews of her reports, and ultimately, someone would need to take responsibility for the mechanical failure that had compromised a critical mission. As the lowest-ranking person in the chain of responsibility, she knew where that blame would likely fall. But watching the aircraft struggle through its emergency landing, Sarah felt something deeper than professional frustration. She felt the weight of unused potential, the crushing disappointment of being relegated to the sidelines while others flew the aircraft she could have piloted with greater skill and understanding. Every day, she worked on machines that represented the pinnacle of aviation technology, yet she remained earthbound, invisible, and completely undervalued by the system she served with quiet dedication. The unknown aircraft, meanwhile, continued its approach toward restricted airspace, and the base had no available interceptors to respond to what was rapidly becoming a national security crisis. Sarah knew that somewhere in the command center, officers were frantically searching for alternatives, but their options were limited by the rigid protocols that governed military aviation operations. They needed a pilot, and they needed one immediately. What they didn't realize was that the solution to their problem was standing in the hangar, wearing greasy coveralls and carrying a secret that would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet maintenance technician who'd been invisible for far too long. The stage was set for a revelation that would challenge every assumption about rank, capability, and the true meaning of military service. Sarah Chen was about to step out of the shadows and into a spotlight that would illuminate not just her hidden abilities, but the fundamental flaws in a system that measured worth by uniforms and insignia rather than skill and dedication. As the emergency sirens continued to wail across the base, Sarah made a decision that would transform her from invisible mechanic to something far more dangerous and necessary. The time for hiding was over, and the truth was about to emerge in the most dramatic way possible. The quiet technician who'd been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated was about to prove that sometimes the most extraordinary people hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for the moment when their true capabilities become not just relevant, but absolutely essential for survival. Sarah Chen had been preparing for this moment her entire military career, and now, with lives hanging in the balance and conventional solutions failing, she was finally ready to step forward and claim her place in the sky. The only question was whether the system that had rejected her would be willing to accept the truth about who she really was and what she was truly capable of achieving. The answer would come soon enough, and it would change everything. The emergency klaxon pierced the afternoon air as Captain Reynolds limped his damaged F-22 toward the runway, black smoke trailing from the left engine. In the command center, Colonel Patricia Hayes stood before a wall of monitors displaying the approaching threat, her weathered face etched with the kind of concern that came from 3 decades of military service. The unidentified aircraft had crossed into restricted airspace, and every second of delay brought it closer to sensitive installations that could not be compromised under any circumstances. "Sir, we have a problem," announced Major Davis, the base operations officer, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The unknown aircraft is maintaining course toward Sector 7. Intelligence suggests it may be conducting reconnaissance on our classified stealth development program. We need an intercept, and we need it now." Colonel Hayes studied the tactical display with the calculating gaze of someone who'd spent years making impossible decisions under pressure. The approaching aircraft was flying at an altitude and speed that suggested either highly advanced technology or pilots with nothing left to lose. Either scenario represented a significant threat to national security, yet her options for response were disappearing with each passing minute. "What's our status on available interceptors?" she demanded, already knowing the answer would be insufficient for the rapidly developing crisis. "Reynolds is making an emergency landing with multiple system failures," Davis reported, his fingers dancing across the control panel as he tracked multiple aircraft simultaneously. "Our other 2 F-22s are in maintenance for scheduled inspections, and the backup F-16s don't have the performance characteristics needed for this type of intercept. The nearest available fighters are at Nellis, but they're 40 minutes out." Hayes felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. 40 minutes was an eternity in tactical aviation, more than enough time for the unknown aircraft to complete whatever mission had brought it into restricted airspace. The intelligence briefing she'd received that morning had emphasized the critical nature of the projects housed in Sector 7, classified programs that represented years of development and billions of taxpayer dollars. "Alert all base security forces," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I want every available surface-to-air missile system online and ready to engage. If we can't intercept this aircraft, we'll have to bring it down before it can complete its reconnaissance mission." The command center erupted in controlled chaos as personnel scrambled to implement the colonel's orders. Sarah Chen, meanwhile, had finished securing the hangar and was walking toward the maintenance office when she heard the distinctive whine of the F-22's engines approaching for an emergency landing. Her trained ear immediately recognized the irregular rhythm that indicated serious mechanical problems, and she felt a mixture of vindication and genuine concern for Reynolds' safety. As she watched the aircraft touch down with a shower of sparks from its damaged landing gear, Sarah's mind was already analyzing the failure modes that had led to this crisis. The fuel flow irregularities she documented in her maintenance reports, had clearly progressed beyond the point of safe operation, exactly as she'd predicted. But her satisfaction at being proven correct was overshadowed by the knowledge that her expertise could have prevented this entire situation. The fire truck surrounded the F-22 as it rolled to a stop, their foam systems ready to suppress any flames that might erupt from the damaged engine. Reynolds climbed out of the cockpit with the shaky movements of someone who just experienced his first serious mechanical emergency, his earlier arrogance replaced by the humbled demeanor of a pilot who'd been reminded of his mortality. Sarah approached the aircraft with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. She'd maintained this particular F-22 for months, and she could diagnose its problems with the same accuracy that a doctor might examine a familiar patient. Her hands moved with practiced confidence as she began the post-flight inspection, documenting damage and identifying the root causes of the system failures. "Looks like you were right about that fuel flow issue," admitted Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the maintenance supervisor who dismissed her earlier reports as overcautious paranoia. His tone carried the grudging respect of someone who'd been forced to acknowledge expertise he'd previously overlooked. "The left engine's fuel pump is completely shot, and there's collateral damage to the hydraulic systems." Sarah nodded without satisfaction, her attention focused on the technical details rather than personal vindication. "The fuel pump failure was predictable based on the pressure variations I documented last week. The hydraulic damage is secondary, caused by metal debris from the pump housing. With proper preventive maintenance, this could have been avoided entirely." Rodriguez winced at the implicit criticism, but he couldn't argue with Sarah's assessment. The investigation that would follow would undoubtedly highlight the maintenance warnings that had been ignored, and his decision to prioritize flight schedules over mechanical concerns would be scrutinized by higher authorities. The failed intercept mission would have consequences that extended far beyond one damaged aircraft. In the command center, Colonel Hayes was facing the grim reality of her limited options. The unknown aircraft had penetrated deep into restricted airspace, and her surface-to-air missiles were designed for area defense rather than precision interception. Using them would mean destroying the aircraft and any intelligence it might contain, while also risking civilian casualties if debris fell in populated areas. "Colonel, I have an idea," ventured Lieutenant Martinez, the youngest operations officer in the command center. His suggestion carried the desperate creativity of someone who'd exhausted conventional solutions. "What if we scramble one of the F-16s? I know they don't have the performance characteristics of the F-22, but they might be able to intercept if we vector them to the right position." Hayes considered the proposal with the methodical analysis of someone who'd learned to evaluate every option before making critical decisions. The F-16s were reliable aircraft, but they lacked the speed and altitude capabilities needed for this particular mission. The unknown aircraft was operating at the edge of the F-16's performance envelope, and any intercept would require perfect timing and exceptional piloting skills. "Who's qualified to fly the F-16?" she asked, already knowing that her pilot roster was desperately thin. Most of her experienced aviators were either in the air, in maintenance, or on leave. The few remaining pilots were either too inexperienced for such a critical mission, or lacked the specific qualifications needed for high-altitude intercept operations. "Captain Morrison is available," Martinez replied, consulting his personnel roster with the efficiency of someone who'd memorized every pilot's qualifications. "He's got over 2,000 hours in the F-16, and he's certified for high-altitude intercept operations. But sir, he's been grounded for the past month due to a training accident. His medical clearance was revoked pending a psychological evaluation." Hayes felt her options narrowing to an impossibly small window. Morrison was an excellent pilot, but his recent accident had raised questions about his judgment under pressure. The psychological evaluation was a standard precaution, but it meant he wasn't officially cleared for flight operations. Using him would require bypassing regulations that existed for good reason, yet the alternative was allowing the unknown aircraft to complete its mission unopposed. "What about Lieutenant Chen?" asked Major Davis, scanning through the personnel database with the desperation of someone searching for any available solution. "She's got F-16 qualifications, and her psychological profile is clean." Hayes frowned as she tried to place the name. "Chen? I don't recall any Lieutenant Chen in the pilot roster. Are you sure you're reading that correctly?" Davis double-checked his screen, his expression growing confused as he attempted to reconcile the information displayed before him. The database shows F-16 qualification, but the rank and position don't match standard pilot assignments. It lists her as maintenance personnel, but that can't be right if she's qualified to fly fighters. The command center fell silent as the implications of this discovery sank in. Military databases were notoriously accurate when it came to personnel qualifications, and the idea that a maintenance technician might possess fighter pilot credentials was almost impossible to believe. Yet the computer system was displaying information that challenged every assumption about military organization and protocol. "Pull up her complete file," Hayes ordered, her curiosity overriding her skepticism. "I want to see everything we have on this Chen person." The screen flickered as Davis accessed the classified personnel database, his security clearance allowing him to view information that was normally restricted to senior officers. What he found there made him pause, his eyes widening as he read through details that seemed to belong to someone entirely different from the maintenance technician they thought they knew. "Colonel, you need to see this," Davis said, his voice carrying the amazement of someone who'd just discovered buried treasure. "According to her file, Sergeant Chen has flight qualifications that exceed most of our active pilots. She's certified on multiple aircraft types, including the F-16, F-18, and even the F-22. Her test scores are off the charts, and she's got advanced ratings in high-altitude intercept operations." Hayes moved closer to the screen, her experienced eye scanning through the impressive list of qualifications and achievements. The file painted a picture of someone who should have been wearing officer's bars rather than enlisted stripes, someone whose capabilities far exceeded what her current position suggested. Yet there were gaps in the record, classified entries that were marked above even Hayes' security clearance. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, her mind struggling to reconcile the information displayed before her with the quiet maintenance technician she'd barely noticed during her tenure as base commander. Why would someone with these qualifications be working in maintenance? And why isn't she in our pilot rotation? The answer to those questions lay buried in classified files that told a story of exceptional ability, personal sacrifice, and institutional injustice. But those details would have to wait, because the unknown aircraft was continuing its approach toward critical facilities, and time was running out for any kind of effective response. "Where is Sergeant Chen now?" Hayes asked, her command voice cutting through the confusion that had settled over the operations center. "I want to speak with her immediately." Martinez quickly contacted the maintenance office, his radio call crackling with urgency as he attempted to locate the person who might represent their only hope for preventing the security disaster. The response came back within minutes, identifying Sarah's location near the damaged F-22, where she was conducting post-flight inspections. "Send someone to bring her here immediately," Hayes ordered, her mind already shifting into the tactical mode that had served her well throughout her military career. "And I want a complete briefing on her background, qualifications, and any classified information that might explain why she's been flying under the radar." As the command center staff scrambled to implement her orders, Hayes found herself facing a situation that challenged every assumption about military hierarchy and protocol. The idea that their salvation might come from someone wearing enlisted stripes rather than officers' bars was almost incomprehensible, yet the evidence was displayed clearly on the computer screens before her. Sarah Chen was finishing her inspection of the damaged F-22 when Staff Sergeant Williams approached her with the hurried gait of someone delivering urgent orders. His expression carried the confusion of someone who'd been tasked with something he didn't fully understand, and his voice reflected the uncertainty that came from disrupting established routines. "Chen, you need to report to the command center." "Immediately," he announced, his tone suggesting that arguing would be pointless. "Colonel Hayes wants to see you right away. Something about flight qualifications and classified information." Sarah felt her stomach drop as the implications of the summons became clear. She'd spent years maintaining her low profile, carefully avoiding any situation that might expose the truth about her background. The request to report to the command center suggested that her carefully constructed cover was beginning to unravel. And the consequences of that discovery were impossible to predict. "Did they say what this is about?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer would be evasive. Williams shrugged with the indifference of someone who'd learned not to question orders from senior officers. "All I know is that it's urgent, and you're supposed to drop whatever you're doing and get up there immediately." The colonel seemed pretty intense about it. Sarah wiped her hands on her coveralls, buying time while her mind raced through the possible scenarios that might have led to this moment. The failed intercept mission, the approaching unknown aircraft, and her own qualifications hidden in classified files all pointed toward a convergence that she'd hoped to avoid for years. But circumstances were forcing her hand, and the time for hiding was rapidly coming to an end. As she walked toward the command center, Sarah felt the weight of her concealed identity pressing down on her like a physical burden. Beneath her uniform, hidden by the fabric of her coveralls, lay a chain around her neck that carried more than simple identification tags. The metal disc that rested against her chest bore markings that would explain everything to anyone with the clearance to understand their significance. The command center buzzed with the controlled chaos of a military installation facing a crisis. Officers moved with purpose between workstations, their voices carrying the urgency of people dealing with a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond their control. Sarah entered the room feeling like an intruder in a world where she'd never been welcome, despite her qualifications to contribute to the solution they desperately needed. Colonel Hayes looked up from the tactical display as Sarah approached, her experienced eye taking in details that most officers would have missed. The quiet confidence in Sarah's posture, the way she moved with the unconscious grace of someone accustomed to high-stress situations, and the alert intelligence in her eyes all suggested capabilities that transcended her enlisted rank and maintenance duties. "Sergeant Chen," Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades making difficult decisions under pressure. "I've been reviewing your personnel file, and I have some questions about your background and qualifications." Sarah stood at attention with the rigid posture required by military protocol, her expression carefully neutral despite the anxiety that was building in her chest. "Yes, ma'am. What would you like to know?" Hayes gestured toward the tactical display that showed the approaching unknown aircraft, its position updated in real time as it continued toward facilities that contained some of the nation's most sensitive military secrets. "We have a situation that requires immediate fighter intercept, and our available pilots are either grounded or unavailable. However, your file indicates qualifications that might make you suitable for this mission." The room fell silent as the implications of the colonel's words sank in. The idea that an enlisted maintenance technician might be called upon to pilot a fighter aircraft in a combat situation was so unprecedented that most of the officers present weren't sure how to react. Yet the evidence displayed on their computer screens suggested that Sarah Chen possessed capabilities that far exceeded what her current position indicated. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking," Sarah replied, though her tone suggested she understood perfectly well. "I'm assigned to maintenance duties, and I don't have current flight status." Hayes studied her with the penetrating gaze of someone who'd spent years reading between the lines of military bureaucracy. Your file shows advanced flight qualifications on multiple aircraft types, including the F-16. It also shows test scores that would qualify you for advanced fighter pilot training. What I want to know is why someone with your capabilities is working in maintenance instead of flying fighters. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah realized that her carefully maintained cover was crumbling under the weight of circumstances beyond her control. The approaching unknown aircraft represented a threat that couldn't be ignored, and her hidden qualifications might be the only thing standing between success and disaster. Colonel, there are aspects of my background that are classified above your current clearance level, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of secrets that had shaped her entire military career. I can't discuss the details without proper authorization, but I can confirm that I maintain current qualifications on the F-16 and other aircraft systems. Hayes felt a chill of recognition as she realized she was dealing with someone whose true identity was buried beneath layers of classification and institutional secrecy. The military was full of people whose official records told only part of their story. Operatives and specialists whose real capabilities were hidden for reasons of national security. I need to see your identification, Hayes said, her tone carrying the authority of someone who'd learned to demand answers when lives were at stake. Everything you carry right now. Sarah hesitated for a moment, knowing that compliance would expose secrets she'd guarded for years. But the tactical display showed the unknown aircraft continuing its approach, and she understood that the time for hiding was over. With steady hands, she reached beneath her coveralls and withdrew the chain that had remained hidden for so long. The metal disc that emerged caught the light from the command center's displays, its surface bearing markings that made several officers step back in surprise. This wasn't a standard military identification tag, but something far more significant. Something that carried implications that would change everything they thought they knew about the quiet maintenance technician who'd been invisible for so long. Colonel Hayes examined the tag with the careful attention of someone who understood its significance, her expression shifting from curiosity to amazement as she recognized the markings that identified Sarah as something far more dangerous and capable than anyone had imagined. The classified designation stamped into the metal told a story of elite training, specialized missions, and capabilities that were reserved for only the most exceptional individuals in the military. Dear God, Hayes whispered, her voice carrying the awe of someone who just discovered they'd been working alongside a legend. You're not just qualified to fly fighters. You're qualified to do things that most of our pilots can only dream about. The room erupted in whispered conversations as the implications of the discovery spread through the command center. Sarah Chen wasn't just a maintenance technician with hidden flight qualifications. She was something far more significant, someone whose true identity had been concealed for reasons that were now becoming clear. The unknown aircraft continued its approach toward restricted airspace, but for the first time since the crisis began, Colonel Hayes felt a glimmer of hope that they might have found a solution to their seemingly impossible problem. The quiet enlisted woman standing before her represented capabilities that could turn the tide of the entire situation, if only she was willing to step out of the shadows and into the cockpit where she truly belonged. The time for hiding was over, and the truth was about to emerge in the most dramatic way possible. The classified dog tag gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the command center, its metallic surface bearing insignia that made Colonel Hayes step back in recognition. The markings weren't just military identification, they represented something far more significant, a designation reserved for individuals who'd undergone training so specialized that their very existence was classified at the highest levels of government. Project Nighthawk, Hayes read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper as she recognized the program that had been whispered about in intelligence briefings, but never officially acknowledged. Test Pilot Division, Special Operations Command. Clearance level Omega-7. Major Davis nearly dropped his clipboard as the implications hit him like a physical blow. Omega-7 clearance was theoretical for most military personnel, a security level so high that even knowing about its existence required special authorization. The woman standing before them wasn't just a qualified pilot. She was one of the most elite aviators in the entire military. Someone whose capabilities had been deliberately hidden for reasons that were now becoming terrifyingly clear. "Ma'am." "I can explain," Sarah began, her voice carrying the weight of years of enforced silence. "But I need authorization from the Pentagon before I can discuss operational details. What I can tell you is that my current assignment is part of a deep cover operation designed to maintain plausible deniability for activities that officially never happened." Hayes studied the dog tag with the fascination of someone examining a relic from a forgotten civilization. Project Nighthawk had been mentioned in classified briefings as a theoretical program, something that might exist but probably didn't, a ghost story told in the shadows of military intelligence. Yet here was proof that the program was not only real but had produced operatives of such exceptional capability that they could hide in plain sight for years without detection. "The unknown aircraft," Hayes said suddenly, her tactical mind making connections that others had missed. "This isn't a coincidence. Someone knows you're here, and they're forcing you to reveal yourself." Sarah's expression shifted from carefully controlled neutrality to the alert intensity of someone who just realized the true scope of the threat they were facing. The approaching aircraft wasn't conducting random reconnaissance. It was specifically targeting this base. At this time, when conventional defenses were compromised and only one person possessed the capabilities needed to respond effectively. "Colonel, I need immediate access to classified communications channels," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-or-death decisions under impossible pressure. "If this is what I think it is, we're dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple airspace violation." The tactical display updated with new information as the unknown aircraft altered course, its flight path now clearly directed toward the most sensitive areas of the base. Intelligence analysts scrambled to identify the aircraft type, but their databases contained no matches for the unusual signature it was displaying. Whatever was approaching represented technology that was either highly advanced or deliberately disguised to avoid conventional identification methods. "Grant her access," Hayes ordered, her decision made with the decisive authority that had earned her command of one of the nation's most important military installations. Whatever protocols were breaking, they're less important than stopping that aircraft from completing its mission. Sarah moved to the secure communications console with the fluid confidence of someone who'd operated such equipment countless times before. Her fingers danced across controls that most officers had never been authorized to touch, accessing channels that existed in the shadows of official military communications. The responses she received were immediate and urgent, confirming her worst suspicions about the approaching threat. "It's a stolen prototype," she announced, her voice cutting through the tension that had settled over the command center like fog. "Advanced stealth technology that was supposed to be destroyed after testing. Someone managed to acquire it and modify it for their own purposes. This isn't reconnaissance. It's a direct attack on classified programs using our own technology against us." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled officers as they realized they were facing an enemy who possessed intimate knowledge of their defenses and capabilities. The approaching aircraft wasn't just advanced, it was specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in their security systems, using stolen technology to penetrate defenses that should have been impregnable. "What are our options?" Hayes demanded, her command voice cutting through the growing panic that threatened to overwhelm her staff. "Can our surface-to-air missiles engage this target?" Sarah shook her head with the grim certainty of someone who understood exactly what they were facing. "The stealth modifications make it nearly invisible to conventional radar systems. By the time our missiles can lock onto it, it will already be over the target area. We need a pilot who can engage it directly, someone who understands both its capabilities and its weaknesses. The implication was clear, and every person in the command center understood what she was suggesting. Sarah Chen wasn't just qualified to fly the intercept mission. She was the only person on the base who possessed the specialized knowledge needed to defeat an enemy using technology she'd helped develop and test. The F-16 isn't equipped for this type of engagement, Hayes protested, her tactical mind identifying the obvious flaw in the proposed solution. You'd be flying a conventional fighter against an aircraft that represents the pinnacle of stealth technology. Sarah's expression carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. The F-16 has advantages that the stolen prototype doesn't expect. It's older technology, which means it operates on frequencies and systems that the stealth modifications weren't designed to counter. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Hayes studied the tactical display with the calculating gaze of someone who'd spent decades making impossible decisions under pressure. The approaching aircraft was now less than 15 minutes from its target, and conventional defenses had proven inadequate. The choice was simple: trust an enlisted maintenance technician who claimed to be one of the military's most elite pilots, or watch helplessly as critical national security assets were compromised by an enemy using stolen technology. Authorization granted, Hayes announced, her decision made with the finality of someone who understood that hesitation could be fatal. Sergeant Chen, you are hereby granted temporary flight status and authorization to engage the unknown aircraft using any means necessary. The command center erupted in controlled chaos as personnel scrambled to prepare for an engagement unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. Sarah moved toward the exit with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Her transformation from invisible maintenance worker to elite combat pilot happening so quickly that some officers weren't sure they'd witnessed it correctly. "Wait," called Major Davis, his voice carrying the confusion of someone struggling to process events that challenged everything he thought he knew about military hierarchy. Shouldn't there be paperwork? Authorization codes? Some kind of official process for this? Sarah paused at the doorway, her expression carrying the patient understanding of someone explaining simple concepts to children. "Major, when you're dealing with threats at this level, the paperwork comes after you've saved the world. Right now, bureaucracy is a luxury we can't afford." The walk to the flight line took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime as Sarah shed the carefully maintained facade that had defined her existence for years. Each step brought her closer to the aircraft that would either vindicate her hidden capabilities or expose her as a fraud whose claims exceeded her actual abilities. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders like gravity itself. The F-16 waited on the tarmac like a sleeping predator, its sleek lines and aggressive stance representing decades of aeronautical evolution and combat refinement. Sarah approached the aircraft with the reverent appreciation of someone who understood both its capabilities and its limitations, her trained eye identifying every system and component that would either ensure her success or contribute to her failure. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at her side, his expression carrying the bewildered respect of someone who just watched his understanding of military hierarchy collapse in real time. "Ma'am, I've never prepared an aircraft for this type of mission. What special equipment do you need?" Sarah smiled with the confidence of someone who'd trained for scenarios that others couldn't imagine. "Standard air-to-air configuration, but I want the radar tuned to specific frequencies that will penetrate the stealth modifications. The stolen prototype was designed to hide from modern systems, but it's vulnerable to older detection methods." Her hands moved with practiced efficiency through the pre-flight inspection, checking systems and components with the thoroughness of someone whose life would depend on mechanical perfection. Every gauge, every indicator, every subtle detail. received her complete attention as she prepared for a mission that would test every skill she'd acquired through years of classified training. The radio crackled with updates from the command center as the unknown aircraft continued its approach toward critical facilities. Time was running out, and the window for successful interception was closing with each passing second. Sarah climbed into the cockpit with the fluid motion of someone who'd performed the action thousands of times, her hands automatically finding controls that felt as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Tower, this is Viper 1 requesting immediate takeoff clearance," she announced, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd learned to project confidence even in the face of impossible odds. The call sign she'd chosen wasn't random, it carried personal significance that connected her to a past she'd been forced to abandon but never forgotten. "Viper 1, you are cleared for immediate takeoff," came the response from Colonel Hayes. Herself, her voice transmitted directly from the command center. "Godspeed, and bring our bird home safely." The F-16's engine roared to life with the explosive power that marked it as one of the most successful fighter aircraft ever built. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the moment of truth, when years of training and preparation converged into a single point of action that would determine success or failure. The aircraft rolled toward the runway with the purposeful momentum of destiny itself. Acceleration pressed her back into the ejection seat as the F-16 gathered speed, its single engine producing thrust that transformed machine and pilot into a unified weapon system. The moment of rotation came with mathematical precision, and suddenly she was airborne, climbing rapidly toward an engagement that would either validate her hidden identity or expose her claims as elaborate fiction. "Viper 1, radar contact bearing 090, altitude 40,000 feet and climbing," came the update from ground control, their voices tense with the knowledge that they were witnessing something unprecedented in military aviation. "Target is maintaining course toward restricted airspace." Sarah's radar screen flickered with the faint signature of the approaching aircraft, its stealth modifications making it appear and disappear like a ghost haunting the edges of electronic perception. She adjusted her intercept course with the precision of someone who understood both the capabilities of her aircraft and the limitations of her opponent, setting up an engagement geometry that would maximize her advantages while minimizing theirs. "Contact confirmed," she reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. "Beginning intercept sequence. Estimated time to engagement, 8 minutes. The stolen prototype appeared on her screen as a faint blur that challenged the limits of her detection systems, but Sarah had trained for exactly this type of encounter. Her modifications to the F-16's radar allowed her to track targets that should have been invisible, using techniques that most pilots had never heard of and equipment that officially didn't exist. As the distance closed between the two aircraft, Sarah felt the familiar calm that settled over her during high-stress situations. This was what she'd trained for during years of classified programs, the moment when theory became reality and preparation met opportunity. The approaching aircraft represented everything she'd been taught to defeat, and she was exactly where she belonged. "Viper 1, you are cleared to engage," came the authorization from Colonel Hayes, her words carrying the weight of national security and the hopes of everyone who'd placed their trust in an enlisted maintenance technician who claimed to be something far more dangerous. The engagement began at maximum radar range, with Sarah launching missiles that used guidance systems specifically designed to defeat stealth technology. The stolen prototype attempted evasive maneuvers that would have defeated conventional fighters, but the F-16's older systems proved immune to electronic countermeasures that had been designed to confuse more modern aircraft. "Target hit," Sarah reported as her first missile found its mark, damaging the stolen aircraft stealth systems and making it visible to conventional radar for the first time. Stealth capability compromised. Beginning close-range engagement. The dogfight that followed was unlike anything witnessed in modern aviation, a contest between cutting-edge technology and proven tactics, between advanced systems and pilot skill. Sarah maneuvered the F-16 through impossible geometries, using every advantage her aircraft possessed while exploiting weaknesses in the stolen prototype that its operators hadn't anticipated. The stolen aircraft's pilot was skilled, but they were flying technology they didn't fully understand against an opponent who'd helped develop the very systems they were trying to exploit. Sarah's tactical awareness and intimate knowledge of both aircraft types gave her advantages that no amount of advanced technology could overcome. Fox 3, she called out as her final missile achieved lock-on, the terminology carrying professional satisfaction as the engagement reached its inevitable conclusion. The stolen prototype erupted in a fireball that lit up the desert sky, its debris falling harmlessly into restricted airspace where recovery teams would ensure that no classified technology survived to threaten national security again. Viper 1. Target destroyed, Sarah reported, her voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd accomplished exactly what she'd set out to do. Returning to base for debriefing and equipment shutdown. The flight back to Edwards felt like a victory lap, with ground control providing continuous updates on recovery operations and security sweeps. Sarah had not only prevented a catastrophic security breach, but had done so using tactics and equipment that would revolutionize how the military approached similar threats in the future. Colonel Hayes was waiting on the tarmac as the F-16 touched down, her expression carrying the amazed respect of someone who just witnessed the impossible become routine. The entire base had followed the engagement through radio communications, and word of Sarah's success had already reached the highest levels of military command. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Chen," Hayes said as Sarah climbed down from the cockpit, her tone carrying the formal respect reserved for heroes who'd exceeded every expectation. "I've received calls from the Pentagon, and there are some very important people who want to discuss your future assignment options." Sarah removed her helmet with the tired satisfaction of someone who just completed the most important mission of her career. The transformation from invisible maintenance worker to elite combat pilot was complete, but she understood that her life would never return to the quiet anonymity she'd maintained for so long. "Colonel, I appreciate the recognition, but I need to request that my identity remain classified," she said, her voice carrying the professional concern of someone who understood the broader implications of exposure. "There are ongoing operations that depend on my ability to remain invisible when necessary." Hayes nodded with the understanding of someone who'd spent years dealing with classified programs and their requirements for operational security. "Your identity will be protected, but your capabilities are now known to people who can ensure they're used appropriately. The days of hiding in maintenance hangars are over." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the threat that had been neutralized, confirming Sarah's assessment that the stolen prototype represented technology that could have compromised decades of military research and development. Her successful interception had prevented a security disaster that would have taken years to recover from. But more importantly, her emergence from the shadows had exposed fundamental flaws in how the military identified and utilized exceptional talent. The revelation that one of their most capable pilots had been working in maintenance for years sparked a comprehensive review of personnel, assignment procedures, and qualification assessment protocols. Sarah Chun's story became legend within certain circles of military aviation, though her identity remained classified and her existence officially denied. She became a reminder that extraordinary people often hide in ordinary places, waiting for the moment when their true capabilities become not just relevant, but essential for survival. The base established new protocols for identifying and nurturing exceptional talent, regardless of rank or assignment, ensuring that no one with Sarah's capabilities would remain hidden in the shadows when their skills could serve the greater good. Her legacy extended far beyond one successful mission to encompass a fundamental change in how the military approached human resource management. The stolen prototype's wreckage yielded intelligence that led to the identification and arrest of the spy network responsible for its theft, preventing future security breaches that could have compromised national defense. Sarah's actions had prevented not just one attack, but an entire campaign of espionage that threatened the foundation of military technological superiority. Years later, pilots at Edwards and other installations would sometimes hear stories about the maintenance technician who'd saved the base from disaster, though the details remained deliberately vague and the protagonist's identity carefully protected. The legend served as inspiration for enlisted personnel who wondered whether their own hidden talents might someday be recognized and valued. Sarah returned to her classified assignments with a new understanding of her own worth and capabilities. No longer content to remain invisible when she could contribute more directly to national security. Her superiors provided her with assignments that utilized her full range of skills while maintaining the operational security that her unique position required. The F-16 she'd flown during the intercept mission was retired to a place of honor in the base museum, its placard noting only that it had been flown during a classified operation that prevented a significant security breach. Visitors would never know the full story, but those who'd witnessed Sarah's transformation understood the deeper meaning behind the simple display. Colonel Hayes continued her command with a new appreciation for the hidden talents that existed within her organization, implementing policies that encouraged personnel to reveal their capabilities rather than hide them. Her leadership style evolved to emphasize recognition and opportunity over rigid adherence to traditional hierarchies. The maintenance hangar where Sarah had worked for years became a symbol of potential rather than limitation, a reminder that extraordinary capabilities could be found in the most unexpected places. New personnel arriving at the base were told that everyone's background deserved respect because you never knew who might be capable of saving the day when circumstances demanded it. Sarah's dog tag was eventually returned to its classified storage location, but its brief exposure had accomplished something that years of traditional training programs had failed to achieve. It had proven that the military's greatest assets weren't always found in expected places or wearing appropriate uniforms. The unknown aircraft's attack had been intended to expose weaknesses in American military security, but instead it had revealed hidden strengths that made the entire system more resilient and effective. Sarah Chen's emergence from the shadows had transformed what could have been a catastrophic defeat into a decisive victory that strengthened national defense capabilities. The story of the maintenance technician who became a hero in a single afternoon served as proof that respect shouldn't be based on rank or position, but on recognition of the humanity and potential that exists in everyone. Sometimes the most important people are those who work quietly behind the scenes, waiting for the moment when their true capabilities become essential for survival. Her legacy lived on in the changed attitudes and improved policies that ensured no one's talents would remain hidden when they could serve the greater good. Sarah Chen had proven that heroes don't always announce themselves with fanfare and ceremony. Sometimes they wear coveralls and work in maintenance hangars, waiting for the moment when their country needs them most. The quiet technician who'd been dismissed and overlooked had saved not just one military installation, but the entire foundation of national security, proving that extraordinary people often hide in ordinary places until circumstances force them to reveal who they really are and what they're truly capable of achieving. The weeks following Sarah's dramatic intercept mission brought changes to Edwards Air Force Base that rippled through every level of military hierarchy. Colonel Hayes found herself fielding calls from Pentagon officials who demanded detailed briefings about the personnel management failures that had allowed such exceptional talent to remain hidden for years. The implications extended far beyond one base, raising questions about how many other qualified individuals might be languishing in assignments that failed to utilize their full capabilities. Sarah's temporary quarters had been upgraded to officers' accommodations pending a comprehensive review of her status and future assignments. The transition felt surreal after years of living in cramped enlisted housing, but she understood that her emergence from the shadows carried consequences that would reshape her entire existence. The classified debriefings continued daily, with intelligence officers attempting to piece together every detail of her background and the programs that had produced such extraordinary capabilities. The stolen prototype's wreckage yielded a treasure trove of intelligence that confirmed Sarah's initial assessment about the scope of the threat they'd faced. Analysis revealed modifications to stealth technology that represented years of careful study and reverse engineering, suggesting a sophisticated espionage operation that had been targeting American military assets for far longer than anyone had suspected. The enemy's intimate knowledge of defensive systems had been comprehensive, enough to nearly succeed in their mission of compromising critical research programs. Major Davis had been assigned as Sarah's liaison officer, a role that required him to coordinate between various intelligence agencies while ensuring that operational security remained intact. His initial skepticism about her claims had been replaced by professional admiration, tempered with healthy respect for capabilities that exceeded his own understanding. The transformation from dismissive superior to supportive colleague illustrated the broader changes taking place throughout the military's approach to talent recognition. "The psychological profiles are fascinating," Davis mentioned during one of their routine briefings, his voice carrying the analytical tone of someone trying to understand phenomena that challenged conventional wisdom. "Your ability to maintain cover for so long while dealing with the frustration of underutilization suggests psychological resilience that exceeds standard military parameters." Sarah appreciated his professional approach to discussions that could have become personally intrusive. The psychological evaluations were necessary components of her security clearance review, but they also represented opportunities to examine aspects of her experience that had never been formally documented. Years of deliberate invisibility had required mental discipline that most people couldn't sustain for extended periods. The hardest part wasn't maintaining the facade, she reflected, her voice carrying the thoughtful consideration of someone examining their own motivations with clinical detachment. It was watching preventable problems occur while being powerless to intervene without exposing my true capabilities. The fuel pump failure that grounded Reynolds was predictable weeks in advance, but my warnings were dismissed as overcautious. Maintenance paranoia. The investigation into maintenance procedures had confirmed Sarah's assessment, revealing systemic problems in how technical expertise was evaluated and utilized. Her detailed reports had been accurate in every particular, but they'd been ignored because her enlisted rank carried less authority than her knowledge warranted. The institutional bias toward rank over competence had created blind spots that compromised operational effectiveness and pilot safety. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez had requested a private meeting to discuss the broader implications of what had been revealed about personnel management and technical expertise recognition. His office felt different now, transformed from a space where he'd exercised unquestioned authority over maintenance operations to something more collaborative and respectful of diverse capabilities. "I've been thinking about all the times I dismissed your input," Rodriguez admitted, his tone carrying the humble recognition of someone who'd learned uncomfortable truths about their own limitations. "The fuel pump issue, the hydraulic system, warnings, the radar calibration problems you identified last month. You were right about everything, and I ignored you because I couldn't see past your rank and assignment." Sarah understood his struggle with the revelations that had challenged everything he thought he knew about leadership and expertise recognition. The military's hierarchical structure served important purposes, but it could also create barriers that prevented valuable information from reaching decision-makers who needed it most. Her experience illustrated how institutional biases could undermine the very objectives they were designed to support. "The system isn't designed to handle people like me," she observed, her analysis carrying the dispassionate clarity of someone who'd studied the problem from multiple perspectives. Exceptional capabilities that don't fit standard categories create confusion about how to classify and utilize them effectively. My cover assignment was necessary for operational security, but it also demonstrated how easily talent can be overlooked when it appears in unexpected places. The broader implications of Sarah's emergence had reached the highest levels of military leadership, generating discussions about fundamental reforms to personnel assessment and assignment procedures. Secretary of Defense briefings had included recommendations for new protocols that would ensure exceptional capabilities were identified and utilized, regardless of rank or traditional career paths. Lieutenant Martinez had been promoted to captain following his role in identifying Sarah's qualifications during the crisis, but he'd also been assigned additional responsibilities for developing new talent recognition programs. His youthful enthusiasm for unconventional solutions had proven valuable during the emergency, and his superiors wanted to institutionalize that kind of creative thinking throughout the military hierarchy. "We're developing screening procedures that look beyond conventional indicators," Martinez explained during a strategy session focused on implementing systemic changes. "The goal is to identify people with exceptional capabilities before crises force them to reveal themselves. Your situation taught us that waiting for emergencies is an inefficient way to discover hidden talent. The new protocols being developed would include psychological assessments designed to identify individuals whose backgrounds might include classified training or specialized capabilities. The challenge lay in creating systems that could recognize exceptional talent without compromising operational security or exposing classified programs that required continued secrecy." Sarah's input had been invaluable in designing these new approaches, though her identity remained protected through carefully structured consultation processes. Her understanding of both the institutional barriers that had hidden her capabilities and the operational requirements that had made such concealment necessary provided insights that purely theoretical approaches couldn't match. The F-16 she'd flown during the intercept mission had undergone extensive analysis to understand how her modifications had enabled success against stealth technology. The radar tuning techniques she'd employed were being incorporated into training programs for pilots who might face similar threats in the future, though the specific methods remained classified at levels that restricted access to a small community of specialists. Captain Reynolds had requested a personal meeting to discuss the fuel pump failure that had grounded his F-22 during the crisis. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by the humbled respect of someone who'd learned that technical expertise deserved recognition regardless of the rank of the person providing it. The near disaster had taught him valuable lessons about the importance of listening to maintenance personnel whose warnings could prevent catastrophic failures. "I owe you an apology," Reynolds said during their conversation, his tone carrying the sincere regret of someone who'd recognized the error of his previous attitudes. "Your warnings about the fuel system were accurate, and my dismissive response could have resulted in a much worse outcome than an emergency landing. I've learned to pay attention when maintenance personnel raise concerns, regardless of their rank or assignment." Sarah appreciated his willingness to acknowledge mistakes and learn from them, understanding that such personal growth was essential for the broader cultural changes that needed to occur throughout military aviation. The relationships between pilots and maintenance personnel were critical for operational success, and mutual respect was fundamental to effective teamwork. The intelligence gathered from the destroyed prototype had led to the identification of several spying networks operating within defense contractor facilities, resulting in arrests that disrupted espionage operations spanning multiple continents. Sarah's successful intercept had prevented not just one security, breach but an entire campaign of technological theft that could have compromised American military superiority for decades. Colonel Hayes had been selected for promotion to brigadier general based partly on her leadership during the crisis and her subsequent implementation of personnel management reforms. Her ability to recognize exceptional talent and authorize unconventional solutions had demonstrated the kind of adaptive leadership that the military needed for facing evolving threats in an increasingly complex security environment. Your emergence forced us to examine assumptions we didn't even realize we were making, Hayes reflected during one of their final meetings before her promotion and transfer to Pentagon assignments. The idea that exceptional capabilities might be hidden throughout our organization in unexpected places has revolutionary implications for how we approach human resource management and operational planning. The cultural transformation at Edwards had begun to influence other installations as word of the successful reforms spread through unofficial channels. Commanders at bases worldwide were implementing similar approaches to talent recognition, creating environments where exceptional capabilities were more likely to be identified and utilized effectively rather than remaining hidden due to institutional biases. Sarah's new assignment would involve training other personnel in the specialized techniques she'd developed for defeating advanced stealth technology, though her role would remain officially classified and her identity protected through compartmentalized security protocols. The knowledge she'd gained through years of classified programs was too valuable to remain confined to one person, but sharing it required careful attention to operational security requirements. The maintenance hangar where she'd worked for years had been transformed into a training facility where personnel from various specialties learned to collaborate more effectively across traditional boundaries. The space served as a symbol of the changes that had resulted from her emergence, representing the breakdown of barriers that had previously prevented effective utilization of diverse talents and capabilities. Staff Sergeant Williams had been selected for advanced technical training based partly on his ability to recognize expertise, regardless of its source. His willingness to learn from Sarah's knowledge during their years of working together had demonstrated the kind of intellectual humility that effective military operations required. The promotion represented recognition that technical competence and leadership potential could be found throughout the enlisted ranks. The psychological studies conducted on Sarah's case had generated new understanding about the mental resilience required for deep cover operations and the stress associated with maintaining false identities for extended periods. The research would influence how future operatives were selected and trained for assignments, requiring similar psychological endurance and operational security discipline. The classified programs that had produced Sarah's exceptional capabilities remained secret, but their existence had been acknowledged at levels that allowed for better coordination between various military specialties. The compartmentalized nature of such operations had sometimes resulted in talented individuals being underutilized because their true capabilities weren't known to commanders who could have employed them more effectively. Medical evaluations had confirmed that Sarah's years of maintaining physical fitness, standards appropriate for combat pilots, rather than maintenance personnel, had contributed to her ability to perform effectively during the intercept mission. Her dedication to maintaining combat readiness, despite her cover assignment, demonstrated the kind of professional commitment that characterized the most exceptional military personnel. The enemy intelligence services responsible for the stolen prototype attack had been significantly disrupted by the security sweeps that followed Sarah's successful intercept. Communication intercepts revealed their surprise at encountering resistance they hadn't anticipated, confirming that her hidden presence at Edwards had been unknown to foreign intelligence agencies that had otherwise achieved remarkable penetration of American military facilities. Training programs were being developed to ensure that other personnel with specialized backgrounds would be recognized and utilized appropriately without compromising operational security requirements. The challenge involved creating systems that could identify exceptional capabilities while maintaining the compartmentalized security protocols that protected classified programs from enemy intelligence services. The technological innovations that Sarah had employed during the intercept mission were being incorporated into defensive systems at installations worldwide, though the specific techniques remained classified to prevent enemy adaptation to American countermeasures. Her success had demonstrated that older technologies could be effectively employed against advanced threats when utilized with sufficient understanding and creativity. Congressional briefings about the incident had resulted in increased funding for programs designed to identify and develop exceptional military talent, regardless of traditional career progression patterns. The recognition that valuable capabilities might exist throughout the military hierarchy rather than being concentrated in officer ranks had significant implications for resource allocation and organizational development strategies. Sarah's story had become a case study taught in classified leadership courses, though her identity remained protected and the specific details were carefully sanitized to prevent compromise of ongoing operations. The lessons learned from her experience were considered essential knowledge for commanders who might face similar situations, requiring recognition and utilization of hidden talents within their organizations. The international implications of the incident had led to enhanced cooperation between allied intelligence services, with Sarah's techniques being shared through carefully controlled channels that maintained operational security while improving collective defensive capabilities. The success against stolen stealth technology had demonstrated that advanced threats could be defeated through innovative application of existing resources and knowledge. The transformation of Edwards Air Force Base from a facility where exceptional talent remained hidden to one where diverse capabilities were actively sought and valued served as a model for organizational change throughout the military. The cultural evolution that had resulted from Sarah's emergence proved that institutional biases could be overcome through leadership commitment and systemic reform efforts. Years later, personnel at Edwards would remember the day when everything changed, when assumptions about rank and capability were challenged by the emergence of someone whose true identity had been hidden in plain sight. The legacy of that transformation continued to influence military culture long after the specific details of the incident had been classified and the participants had moved on to other assignments. Sarah Chen's impact extended far beyond one successful mission to encompass fundamental changes in how the military approached talent recognition and utilization. Her emergence from the shadows had proven that extraordinary people often hide in ordinary places, waiting for circumstances that would reveal their true capabilities and allow them to serve their country in ways that match their exceptional talents and dedication. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.